Do PV systems increase the risk of fire? Yes, they can, but in the same way that any electrical installation can. If certain current-carrying components in a PV system are defective, electric arcs can form. And if there's flammable material nearby, like roofing felt or wood, that can lead to a fire. One special aspect of PV systems is that solar cells act as a current source, which can actually stabilize a fault current compared to AC systems. As long as light is hitting the modules, they continue producing electricity, so the current can only be stopped by interrupting the circuit or irradiating all the modules. That's why PV systems need to be installed with particular care. With around 2 million PV systems currently installed in Germany, there have been cases where this combination of factors has clearly led to fires. In most cases, the fires started because of faults in cabling or connections. A Fraunhofer ISE press release from 2013 puts this into perspective. It states that following existing installation rules and using qualified specialists is the best fire protection. According to their data, only 0.006% of PV systems had caused a fire with major damage. Over a period of 20 years, there were 350 fires involving solar systems, and in 120 cases the PV system was identified as the cause. In 75 cases, the damage was significant, and in 10 cases, a building burned down completely. One important thing to understand about PV systems is that they operate on direct current, and you can't simply switch them off. As long as the modules are exposed to light, they generate electricity. If a low-quality or poorly installed plug connection comes loose, it doesn't necessarily stop the current. Instead, an electric arc can form, which in the worst case can directly cause a fire. That's why there's ongoing research into preventing arcing, as well as into detectors that can provide early warnings if even a small arc occurs. Overall, PV systems do not pose a particularly high fire risk compared to other technical systems, and there are clear electrical safety rules in place. The key is that these rules must be followed. Fires tend to happen more often when inexperienced installation crews work under time pressure or on a piecework basis. Using improper tools, like combination pliers instead of special crimping tools, or mixing incompatible plug systems, can easily create weak points. System operators shouldn't try to save money in the wrong places. In addition to technical improvements, better control and oversight are important. Right now, installers can certify their own work, but one expert recommendation is to make acceptance by an independent third-party mandatory. There is also discussion about requiring regular safety inspections for private PV systems, similar to the 4-year inspection cycle already required for commercial systems. Do PV systems endanger firefighters? Yes, but this is not unique to PV systems. The same applies to many live electrical lines. When firefighters are working from the outside, keeping a minimum distance of a few meters is enough to protect them from electric shock, and this distance is already standard practice for rooftop PV systems. The greater risk arises when firefighters are working inside a building, especially if damaged PV cables come into contact with water or with firefighters themselves. To reduce this risk, the industry is developing emergency shutdown systems that disconnect the modules from the DC cables close to the roof using safety relays. Importantly, no firefighters in Germany have been injured as a result of PV electricity while fighting a fire. One widely reported case in the media turned out to be a misunderstanding. Solar thermal collectors were mistaken for PV modules, and in fact no PV system was installed on the building at all. Early uncertainties among fire brigades have largely been resolved through extensive training. Just like with any electrical installation, water can be used to extinguish fires involving PV systems, as long as the correct nozzle type and a safe distance, typically 1 to 5 meters, are maintained. Claims that fire brigades refuse to extinguish burning buildings because of PV systems have so far proven to be false. Do PV modules hinder firefighting access via the roof? Yes. The second roof layer created by PV modules can make firefighting from above less effective, because the water tends to run off the modules instead of reaching the fire. From the fire brigade's perspective, however, a building that has reached this stage of fire exposure is usually already beyond saving. In other words, the major damage has typically occurred before the PV system becomes a limiting factor for firefighting. Do toxic emissions occur when PV modules burn? 4-cadmium telluride, CDTE, modules. Dispersion calculations by the Bavarian State Office for the Environment show that, even in the event of a fire, a serious risk to nearby residents or the general public can be safely ruled out. For CIS modules, safety assessments are based on independent investigations of the specific products. In the case of wafer-based modules, the backsheet foils may contain fluoropolymers. These materials are not toxic themselves, but they can decompose at very high temperatures during a fire. According to a study by the Bavarian State Office for the Environment, when fluorine-containing plastics burn, the main hazard does not come from hydrogen fluoride, but rather from the other fire gases that are released.